Hi, I want to walk you through adding and using Pantone colors or spot colors within your Illustrator document. Adobe and Pantone work together consistently in order to make sure all of their Pantone colors are found within the programs. So every time there is a new version of Adobe, any new colors are generally added, but you got to find them. And you got to utilize them in there. So in your swatches palette, you've got to find your swatches palette. The first thing we want to do is remove and delete all colors that we aren't going to use. These colors in here are all process colors. We don't want to use them. We want to make sure that we don't accidentally click on there because there is a difference. If we use, let's say, this pink here to this magenta, and it goes to the printer, and in your head you're thinking it's a Pantone color, but you send it to the printer, it's not. So now you've generated 4 colors. Remember, process is a combination of cyan, magenta, yellow, black. So these could potentially be 4 colors versus just the one spot color, which means more money. So you want to make sure you get rid of them. I do. It's the first thing I do when I come into Illustrator if I'm setting up a document for an illustration, but particularly a logo design. I remove these colors. So I click on the red. We can leave white and black, they're fine. But I start with the red, hold my shift key down on my computer, come down to this very last purple. So shift, holding down that shift key, allows me to select all of these in between instead of having to individually click on them. So again, click on red, hold down shift, click on purple, and then I'm going to delete and say yes. That leaves me with white and black, which are fine. Black is we can use that as a Pantone color. There is a Pantone black, but you can just use the CMYK black. It still will show up as one color. And white is a freebie because white is the paper color. So anytime you use white within a logo, it generally is just going to show up as no ink or the paper. So that's a freebie. So we get rid of all the colors, but then we've got to add Pantone colors in. You can find them under the option menu and under Swatch Library, but they've also given us sort of a shortcut here. So right here in the Swatches palette is this Swatches Library menu. So if I click on it, go to Color Books, you'll see all of the Pantone colors, swatches, or books here. The one that we want to focus on, and we generally default to in my industry, is Pantone Solid Coated. So remember, the difference between coated and uncoated is the paper. We don't always know what paper our client is going to print onto. So we default to the solid uncoated because there is a difference in color. So we choose Pantone Solid Coated. It brings up a new swatches palette. Now, I have mine set probably a little bit different than yours is going to look like. I choose large thumbnail, so you're probably is set to small thumbnail. I choose large just so I can really see what I'm looking at, see the color. And then you'll see this field right here. This is called Find Field. So I can show Find Field. That allows me to find a specific color. For instance, Chattahoochee's blue is Pantone 285. If I type the number in, 285, I'm going to find that a lot easier than having to scroll through all those colors and guessing. Once I find the color that I want, I simply click on it. It adds it to my swatches palette automatically for me, and then I can utilize it. So any of the colors that you want in here, you can add just simply by clicking on them and getting them into your swatches palette. And then once they're in the swatches palette, we can start to work with them. So I'm going to create a rectangle just for easy use. Remember, my fill color is the fill of the rectangle. The stroke would be the border around it. And if you looked at the document I gave on tips about creating logos and simplifying and stylizing objects, really not a good idea to use a border or a stroke around something, if at all possible. Sometimes you can use it in a very stylized fashion. It might be a color, it might be a really thick sort of bold stroke. Those are generally okay, but that sort of simple black outline really creates a animated sort of cartoonish look and kind of dumbs down or gives your logo a non-professional look. So be wary of that. Instead, we're going to just simply utilize fill. So I click on it, I can use any of these colors in here for the fill, and by using those are Pantone colors, so they will print appropriately, and your vendor will understand that. Also, just so that you know sort of the indicator, if I look at these, black and white are just sort of empty, but if I look, and I can't zoom in, so forgive me, but if I look at these Pantone colors, they have this sort of white triangle with a black dot. That's your indicator for spot color. So any color that has that, any swatch that has that, is an indication that it is some kind of spot color, whether it's Pantone or another, generally Pantone. And you'll see black and white don't have them. So that's sort of a quick visual for you to know. I also just want to remind you about the properties palette. So, or not properties, I'm sorry. Pathfinder, the other P1, Pathfinder palette. So remember that we can combine shapes in order to create other shapes. Let me grab a circle. Let me get a different color for you so you can see what I'm doing. So I could combine these two. Let's say I needed to use this shape. I'm selecting the two, and then I could unite them in the Pathfinder. Or let's say I wanted to have only this shape, this blue part. If I select both of them, and this is the one I utilize the most, is this minus front. Then remember that that gives me that sort of negative area or the sort of leftover shape that I can use within a logo or to create whatever I need. So just don't forget about that Pathfinder palette in there as you are creating your illustrations for this classwork. Enjoy!